I want to tell you tonight that Christmas Eve means that the child has found you. And because of that, you are good. Now, on Christmas Eve, there's so many different things that you can preach about, I went over some of my homilies from years ago and different homilies that I took notes on because they were important to me. And, we could talk about the Savior of the world coming and dying for us and that salvation is near at hand because Jesus has come. We can talk about Jesus being the light of the world. We can talk about there was no room for him in the inn, and you could go on and on. I was going to talk about one of those yesterday when I was preparing, but I woke up this morning and I said, when I got up to Ken, I said, I don't think God wants me to talk about any of that kind of natural stuff. I'm getting this urge to talk about, you don't have to seek because you are the sought. In other words, I had this sense that the child has found us. And that's what incarnation tends to be all about. We have been found. Now, that's a little bit of a different twist on things because why I think I got that message today was because so much of what we do in our day-to-day life is action-oriented. So think about the different things that you had to do preparing for Christmas. Like, for example, you probably baked cookies, you probably shopped, you probably drove, you probably sought someone, you probably sent cards, you probably did all these different kind of things. And whenever you think about the child found you, it's not about us doing anything, it's about us receiving everything. Now, what's it like to be found? Right? Think about it. I was told once that by a person that his job found him. You ever heard that term? And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I didn't go looking for it. It found me, and it was precisely what I needed. It pulled out of me every one of my gifts. I was talking to another person who said, our dog found us. They weren't looking for a dog, but all of a sudden, this dog found them, and it happened to be the most important dog they ever had. 12 of us from St. Brendan's spent last week at Trinity Cathedral, and we were a part of the walk-in ministry. And so at one point, when I was there, I think it was on Wednesday, there was this gentleman that came in. He was suffering from PTSD. He served in one of our wars, and he was very, very upset because of his girlfriend and some things that were going on, and he was living out on the streets. And so after he received some counseling, then he wondered what we were doing, and we said, well, we have some food. Would you like some food? He says, I'm so hungry. So we gave him some food. And then he said, I'm also so cold. And so I said, I think we have something for you. And so I asked Andy, who was in charge of this, if I could go down to the secret room. There was a secret room. And I knew that there were 3 coats down there. And one of them looked to me like one that Brad was wearing tonight. I asked Brad, what was it called? It says blue puffy coats. You know what I mean? So what did you call them? A down jacket? So there was one of them, I knew it was in there, but it was somewhat dirty. Okay? And so I was just hoping, whenever I was taking this guy by the name of Ray down there, I was just hoping that he would find something. And so we went in there, and as soon as he saw that, he says, that coat has been waiting for me to fill it. And I said, this is exactly the one I had in mind. And what he said was, he says, the coat found me. And so he was so happy to receive that, and then he said, and now I can live out the rest of the winter, because he had nothing else. So what does it mean to be found, you see? So I think for him, what it meant that he had more life, because he was freezing, and so at least he'd be able to live out winter. What does it mean to be found? Think about it. Well, somehow the child found us. So I'm going to throw some theology your way. So I can remember 4 incarnational theologians. One of them was a guy by the name of Edward Schillebeeckx, a Belgian theologian. And he wrote a wonderful book called Jesus, the Sacrament of God. And here's what he says about incarnation. He said, when God decided to step out of himself, Jesus happened, then we happened. Interesting. So somehow God has something to do with us. Karl Rahner said this. He said his incarnational theology was something like this. He said, God somehow knew that if God wanted to play football with us, he had to do it in our stadium. Somehow he has to find us. God has to find us. Paul Tillich said in his incarnational theology, he said, the best way I can define God and incarnation is God is our beyond within. So, always something for us to reach out to, but inside us that's pushing us toward. So somehow God found us. Or the way St. Augustine said it was, God is my goad and goal. So goad meaning the spark by which we seek him and the goal by which we keep striving toward him. So there's something about Christmas, something about the incarnation that says, you have been found. The Lord has taken up residence in you for some reason. So, it's not so much about us seeking, but rather we have been sought after. It's not so much about us giving, but it's more about us being the gift. It's not so much about us loving, it's more about us being loved. It's a different twist. And I think if we get that twist, it makes an incredible difference. We are good. God made us good. And so, if people feel found, then you feel important. You feel special. You feel like you count. You feel like you have potential. And that's what it's all about. That's what Christmas is. You are a gift to be unwrapped by your God. There's so much in us to yet be revealed. I have a friend who was the infirmarian, if you know what that is, when I went to the seminary many years ago. So in 1965, I was like 14 years old, and Brother David Miletich, he was the infirmarian, so he's like 22 years older than me or something like that. Well, in time, he eventually left the brotherhood because he found love, and he got married to his wonderful wife, Mary. I actually had the wedding. I officiated at his wedding. And I got a call from him about 22 years ago, and here's what the call was. David was 69, Mary was 62. This was like 22 years ago. And the call was, Regis, we got a call from the adoption agency, and they have a baby that they would like us to consider taking at 69. And I said, well, David, you always talk to me about you wanting to have a baby at some point. We were thinking 25 years ago, but, he says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What does someone 69 do with a wife 62 years old? What do we do? And I said, I don't know what to tell you what to do, but it's interesting. And so I asked him, I said, pray and I'll pray. Well, he decided to adopt at age 69. And so I know what his fears were. His fears had to do with things like this. Well, I live to see her go to school. All this stuff happened. Well, 22 years later, David is now, I guess, 90 and a half years old. Do you know that he is still as healthy as ever? Whenever they got her, 22 years later, she's like 84. She owned and ran a dance studio still owns and runs it. Do you see how when God unwraps your gift, God's able to pull things out of you that you never thought were ever there? Did you hear about the excavation that was going on in Israel at the palace of Herod the Great in 1960? And whenever they were doing the excavation, they found an ancient jar. And in that ancient jar were seeds. Seeds that they couldn't really identify, and they were seeds from the Tamar vineyards, which was a palm date tree that during the Assyrian War was wiped out, and it was the kind of tree that bore fruit that if you had one, you had good fortune. It was a staple. But during the Babylonian captivity and all that, that tree and all the vegetation were just totally destroyed, so much so that there was nothing of it left. No one had seen it for 500 years. Okay? And then what they found in 1963 was an ancient jar, and they discovered them to be those very seeds. Now, whenever they discovered that, so 2,000 years, that's how old they were, 2,000 years old. Whenever they discovered it, they put it away for the next 4 decades. No one paid attention to it. No one thinking that it was valuable at all. And then this one, botanist, archaeologist, she heard about that, and she says, I just wonder if those seeds have any life in them yet. And so she went on to mess with them, and in 2005, she grew the seeds, the first sapling. So in 2,000 years, this tree's back. And in 2015, that sapling was now 4 feet tall, and they were able to breed from it a female sapling. They called the one Methuselah, and it bore dates. And now, 2 years later, they're pretty sure they're going to have a grove. So what was gone is now back. See what happens whenever you allow yourself to be unwrapped. So, if you have been found, if you are a gift, there's a lot more potential in you to be let loose. I think that's what Christmas is, when you believe that you have been found. You've been treasured, you are a gift. The child has found you. The potential is significantly important. I think of my own life. I'm old but young. I have just been acting like a priest for the last year. I was received 1 year ago this month. And, most people my age are retiring. I'm not, because you see, I believe that the Lord, the child, has found me. I want to live so that God gets every potential out of me that's possible, however long that takes. I think you need to live that way too. There's so much more to you. That's what I think Christmas can be for you this year. The child has found you. You are good.